Good morning. Morning session, first session we're going to be talking about future perspective in engineering asset management. Probably do not have even to introduce the distinguished persons that are here with me today. Joe Amadi-Echendu, that is now chairing the International Society of Engineering Asset Management. David Mckeown, he's Vice President, Honorary Vice President of the Institute of Asset Management. And then we have Edmea Adell, that is Chairperson of IFRAMI, a member of ISO TCT 251, which is dealing with these topics. And I think that in order to somehow start to discuss about this topic, what is the future, what are the trends, the perspective that we see, I would like to talk a little bit about that because I've been finished writing this digital maintenance management book a couple of years ago. You are somehow, wondering what's going to be happening, what sort of skills are we going to be needing in the future. We want, in this book, doing maintenance, but in fact, everything is somehow interrelated. So when we're talking about managing the asset, of course, it's a much broader perspective, the one that we need. But then what I realized during this time, when you're trying to write something and dedicate time to think about what's going to be happening, is that definitely to manage the assets, we are building even more assets. And when I realized is that in this new world, we're building digital assets that are helping us to manage the physical assets. And we've been receiving a lot of messages about digital twins, different digital tools. In fact, these new digital assets, we're not even many times concerned about the management needs that they will have, that we will have to deserve for them. And that to me is a big concern, So what's going to be happening? How are they configured? How they will have to be maintained? What are the needs that we're going to need we're going to have in order to manage these new digital assets. And so this is one thing. I think that digitalization, which is here to stay, is here to help us to be more sustainable. The sustainability is the second topic of this Congress. So this is going to be generating a lot of opportunities, but it's going to be also requiring a lot of asset management, engineering asset management. Now what I see also when we're doing that effort of writing is that a lot of efforts are made to digitalize not only the assets, but also processes where assets are involved. Ownership of the asset becomes something that is somehow foresee who is the owner of the asset. But then we have yesterday here, for example, Talgo people. They are not the owner of the train, but they take care of every single process related to the train management. They set up the services, they define the depots, they somehow explain when we have to schedule maintenance and when to send the train to what type of service and so on. So they have a lot of processes that are also digitalized. So we have a lot of assets in companies that are not owning the assets, but they are building extremely highly complex assets, digital assets that are helping them to provide that service to their customers. So we realize that product is sometimes becoming a service. This product service system issue that we start to read about, it's really interesting topic. This is one of the things we do we have a smart maintenance course, and I'm always trying to tell the people to write about the functionality of an Uber bike, for example. So you see, describe the functionality. What's in the bike? Was it outside the bike? What is the type of, let's say, engineering? What would you need to be delivering a good asset management to that bike? And how is that organized? What is the technology involved? It's really impressive to see how much that how important and how interesting that can be for us. So since we have people that probably they've been for a long period of their life and now they're experiencing it, they see what is going on. I think this is a very important reflection for us today. How do we see this? Where are we going? In terms of everything, asset ownership, in terms of digitalization, for me, that is going to be, we're trying to understand how to define a digital asset, And a digital asset is something that is really complex because it can be something that you've been generating to manage a physical asset, but for a given purpose. So you may have digital twins for many different purposes. You may have a digital twin to do condition-based maintenance to an asset, but also to explore, degradation in the long-term period to find out where to reinvest on the asset. So for different purposes, you will need different models that are, at the end of the day, they all belong to a certain digital asset, and you have to keep track of all those things. And how are these assets going to be, needing that we take care of them? Because probably if we have, for example, a digital twin to do CBM on an asset, we have to train the models. Time passed by, why new operational context may arise, and then we have to retrain the model. So this digital asset needs also probably reconfiguration. It needs maintenance, because you can have problems with data, problem with, say, integrity of the asset. So wow, this is where we are. And so I was trying to somehow, as Joe was mentioning something very funny, this country and neighbors, I'm one of the neighbors, we're going to be today consumed by soccer this afternoon. So we're going to have, first at 5, we have Spain, Germany, and then Portugal, France. So we're going to be, so now this is the only moment we can be quiet and discuss about this. So what do you think? Let's go, if you agree, in this order. I mean, it's okay, Joe, if you want to start. But I'm trying to have these 5-minute reflections, just like what I did. And then probably, and for today, we may open the floor to, because I would like to have more interaction. Today's the last day. It would be nice, as I was discussing with David, probably to have more interaction with you. Okay, Joe, please.
Well, good morning. Bon dia. No, I come from Africa. People respond when you greet. So when I greet you, please greet me back, because that's the African way. Then I know you're listening to me. Bon dia? Bon dia. Now we're talking. I want to say a special thank you to the organizers of Congrega 2024, especially to Nuno and Adolfo, and the people in the background who made it possible for me to be here and to join in this particular session. I've listened for the last 2 days very hard, trying to understand Portuguese. I've understood some of the presentations, and I think this particular session is very, 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 very useful. And I'm glad to see that a number of you, after having the drinks last night, are still awake enough. So I'm going to try and scan my eyes to make sure that you're awake. I have a very bad habit, in the sense that being a professor for many years, having worked in industry and so on, I have a habit of scanning when I speak to people. So for some of you who will be looking at me, I want to make sure that you're actually awake and not still asleep. Because Adolfo wants us to talk about the future. But it's easier for me to talk about the past, because the past actually has record. The future doesn't have a record. So when I talk about the future, I'm only gazing, and my guess could be as good as anybody's. So let me go one step and start from the past. I don't think 5 minutes is going to be enough. I'm a professor, an emeritus for that matter, so we have a lot to say. So I'm going to try and organize what I say, hopefully well. I've published this book, which contains the principles and what I call principles and practical concepts. So if you have time, please patronize the book. I don't make money, but I think I'm at the point where money is not the issue anymore. I want to make sure that some of the ideas that I have, that other people also can share on those ideas and use them to move forward. So thank you very much. You can now take the book off. That's my marketing. I know we have some entrepreneurial competition later on, so I've done my marketing. You're okay now. You can take the book off now. Okay. So some of the things that I'm going to say are there. Let's look a little bit. I'm going to just try and do a very quick scan historically. We use the term engineering asset management, and I'm going to come to why we use that term and why we pushed into that direction. For some of you here, you may recognize some antecedents to what we now call asset management from an engineering point of view. Some of you may recognize the work of Nolan and Heap. Anybody here knows about the work of Nolan and Heap? Yeah, okay, we see some of you, okay. And it was really about reliability. A lot of talk about reliability. And they were looking at reliability of what we now call components. In fact, they are the stuff that we throw away now. And they came up with the bathtub curve, which most of you would have, heard about and so on. And then we went past that stage very, very quickly because, as many people said, then it was, but what was the reason for that? It was really a lot of it coming from the airline sector as the aircraft became a mode of public transport. Initially, it was a mode of transport for the rich people. And of course, when things happen, then there was a problem. When there was a failure, when one rich person dies, we all care about it. When many poor people die, well, it doesn't matter really. So I think that triggered something to then start looking at reliability. And then we got into reliability of systems, because we started by looking at reliability of components, and then we started looking at reliability of systems.
One more minute, Joe.
Oh, okay. And we had the interconnectivity of components. And in parallel, we started having subjects like mechatronics. How many of you studied mechatronics? Okay, so those are, because now we found out that the electrical and the mechanical became, and slowly we also integrated that. And alongside that, we had VLSI, in terms of electronics. We are now able to go away. Anybody here who still designed with an operational amplifier? Anybody knows about operational amplifier? Okay, but now many of you, and then you had to do your isolation, galvanic isolation, and all of that. All of that disappeared as software. A number of technologies came in parallel and merged and fused very, very quickly. And that meant then that you no longer had components, you actually had systems. And that meant then that you had to start thinking about reliability of systems. And so the subject of reliability went further to start looking at how you break down the system, and so on. And we started looking at reliability block diagrams and reliability tree and all of that stuff, which means that you, from the word go, now you're dealing with systems. And of course, for many of you who would know, the subject matter of systems dynamics and systems engineering took off very, very quickly. And fast forward, we got into a situation now where we're dealing with systems. And so when you had a failure, for example, in the UK, IFRAMI in the UK was one of those who cataloged a lot of failures. And so you started looking at how do we take the lessons from the failures to redesign these systems. And so for many of you started hearing life cycle. And I'm one of those who really question people when they say the life cycle of an asset. Say, what are you talking about? That's oxymoron. An asset cannot have a life cycle. It has only one life, and its life doesn't cycle. But I know. The word came from actually the management of the knowledge. The knowledge is self-cycled. You can reuse the knowledge. But when an asset is done, it's done. It doesn't have a second life. But those are some of the antecedents. And we get to the point where the guys who did the project side, systems engineering, then project, then they stopped there. And then we got the people who used the asset, who used the thing, and actually utilization became the key word. And if you actually check the dictionary meaning of an asset, the first word is utilization, utilize. So that if you don't use it, it is not an asset because it's not creating value. So those are the antecedents to where we are. So what we decided at some point, almost 20 years ago, is to say, look, asset management has always been thought about from the financial side. They always talked about stocks and shares, but on what basis? What is the basis for the stocks and shares? It's actually physical assets, right? Tangible assets. And of course, in those tangible assets, you have natural assets, water, your minerals. We don't do that. That was already there in nature. So we said, no, but that means that the whole physical assets includes what man made and what is there in nature. So we said, no, let's focus on the ones that are man-made, and hence the term engineering assets or engineered assets. So that's where we got the distinction, so that we can then apply an engineering mindset, a technological mindset, to the management of assets. Otherwise, asset management was sitting at a level where the real assets, as for those of you who studied law, the real assets were actually being described in monetary terms, but you no longer had connection to the real asset. And that's where we got to. Where do we go to? Maybe that's the next phase that I can allow somebody else.
What we wanted you to ask.
So I will address this in the next stage. And the next stage is simple, very, very simple. We are now at a point where we have highly interconnected systems where we, as humans that are intelligent, have now built assets that are also intelligent, and they're all interconnected. And the interesting thing about an intelligent being or an intelligent thing is that it has higher degrees of freedom. And so going to the future, what that means is that some of us, as human beings, we will not recognize whether we are the asset in terms of the being, or whether we are the thing. And we're seeing that happening more and more. And that's really where, for me, that's where the fear is for me. Because in terms of now beginning to manage those assets, you now wonder who is being managed. Is it the asset managing us as beings, or is it, we as the beings managing the assets? I say that in very, very clearly. If you look at how this is not a phone anymore. This is a companion. So now, who's companion? I'm the companion, or this is my companion? I leave that question for you to think about. So those are the things that I see for the future, but I'll come back again and add a little bit more.
Okay, let's move to next speaker. David, go ahead, please.
So first of all, it's a pleasure to be amongst engineers. I don't do that very often necessarily. I like being an engineer, and I just want to provoke you a little bit with some questions. I would like this to be interactive, not just speaking. So I realized when I was a maintenance engineer responsible for quite a large part of railway, with staff distributed over the countryside, that actually maintenance could only make things worse. You can't improve the original concept and design of the railway or any other product by maintenance. And that's when I started thinking about there may be a better way. I used to take over projects which had been built for the convenience of the construction and design side. They weren't necessarily very maintainable. I was quite good at engineering, I think. I enjoyed the standards. I was competent. I wanted to make people do things the right way. But I spent too much. I had no way of linking the assets for which I was responsible for with the price of a ticket for the passenger. So that's the sort of perspective that took me into asset management. And later, when I was advising the government on a major project, for those who are interested, High Speed 1 in the UK, I realized that the people in charge were civil engineers because, and only because, they spent more. They had the big budget, they were therefore senior, they were therefore in charge. Do they understand systems? No. Do they understand risk? And certainly the risk arising from electrical or intelligent systems? No. And we could talk about the risk the project ran and the waste because it was being run by people who were engineers but didn't understand. So I'm hopefully saying some things which are provocative to some people. I'm going to go on doing that for another couple of minutes. So I think the most important realization I had is the value that comes from assets. It's not the value of assets. And the accountants are wrong, and I hope there's some here that I can annoy. But the whole point is you shouldn't talk about the value of your assets. It's the value that they deliver by being used, and I agree with Joe about that. So the future of asset management, as I see it, is that for 2 or 3 decades we've been trying to get some ideas across, and I hear in normal business now some of the same language. Yesterday, some politicians and people you wouldn't expect talked about silos and the damage that is done by people not being a team. I think we're getting to the point where some of those ideas, whether or not they're called asset management, doesn't matter at all. But they are really good for better ways of organizing ourselves. I think we need to look at 6 capitals. For those who've not heard of it, it's a way of recognizing value other than money. So it's the natural world, humans, and so on. Have a look at it because it's already law in the EU. There is the disclosure of non-financial information which will affect every organization. And I think that will make people think about value and manage for value and do things the way we've been talking about it, not just profit and instant results. There were a couple of other questions on the invitation to comment. So I think sustainability is what I'd like to come to next. There is a lot of very stupid activity going on in the name of sustainability. And by sustainability, I include climate change, resilience, and so on. It is not helpful to subdivide all those things into new topics. And the problem is that they're being bolted on without any thought for what the normal activity is of the organization. And you can't manage properly like that, certainly not in the long term. And this must be a long-term enterprise. So we need to get to the point where sustainability is one of the goals of the organization. And I think asset management can help us do that. I think Adolfo talked a lot about digital. I'll leave other people to add on to that. I want to say only the focus should not be digital, it should be data. And there is a difference. The shiny toys and what should be the engine room is irrelevant and will keep changing and getting bigger and cheaper and faster. The thing that has value is data. Whose data is it? We need to think about sharing it, being secure when we need to be about that, but also using it intelligently. And it's becoming cheaper to have data, which is making people careless about which data matters most and throwing away data when it is no longer needed. So, for example, from the construction phase of assets, why are you keeping all the data that were options? You should only have the as-built data going forward, as an example. So I hope some of this is provocative. The last thing I'm going to be really provocative about is engineering asset management. So EAM normally means enterprise asset management. Why are you subdividing and treating yourselves as in a silo of engineering? And I know this is provocative, bear in mind, this is coming from an engineer. So I hope some conversation might center on some of that. Because if you want to have influence and you want to talk to senior people, being within a group, within one function, is not a good way to start. Have I annoyed anyone yet? Just put your hand up.
Okay.
No?
Okay. Edmea, it's your turn. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Are you going in English for everybody could understand? So first of all, thank you very much for, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for all the team. Thank you for Nuno, for Daniel, for Adolfo. I think that it is a very good Congress. We have very good presentations. We have very good networking. Really, felicitations for this Congress. So, I will give my opinion about this discussion. First of all, something that I say always, what is asset management? This is the big question, because asset management, we can say it has 25 years that we are promoting asset management. In each company, in each congress, in each conference, in each country, in each area, asset management is something different, because, you know, people say asset management for me is this, in my company is this, in my country is this. So I think that we don't know exactly, we can't know, we need to share what is asset management for all the people, but I think there is one point that is very important, is the three trade-offs that we need to always to find a solution, to find a decision. What we want to know is what is the best decision when you are talking about CapEx, OpEx, when you are talking about risk cost, when you are talking about good term and long term. For me, this is the questions that we have for asset management, and what is the value that each company is searching in the end. Value is tangible and tangible, but each company, each organization is searching a kind of value. So the first thing is for knowing exactly what is the value that we are searching. And another thing is that we need to make the big difference between asset management and asset management system. Because when you talk about certification, when you talk about ISO 55000, 1, 2, 3, we are talking about asset management systems. And you need to understand exactly what we talk about asset management and asset management system. So, managing assets are something that is very important. We can't do asset management without well-doing for managing our assets. But asset management is not managing assets. And it's the only thing that I am sure that all the people need to share. And one value, when you talk about value, when you talk about asset management, all around the world, all the organizations that have a project of asset management or that has been certified with an asset management system, in all our experience, the value, the return, the benefit that all the companies, all the organizations are finding are the way of working together. Is breaking silos, is taking decisions together, is having criteria for taking decisions together. And so, what are the future of all of this? We will go on taking decisions. We will not change our way of taking decisions. What you change is the assets that we will manage. And so we need to find solutions, we need to find process for doing asset management with these new assets. We have I need to talk on behalf of our committee, ISO TC 251. So yesterday, it's not yesterday, Wednesday, we have published a new standard that is the 55013, that is managing data assets. So what is this new standard is how we can manage our data, being data linked to the asset, data that gives information about assets, but also data that is one asset. So for our digitalization, we are beginning to talk how we can manage data that is really one asset. And it's not only digital assets, but we have assets as reputation, for example, as brands. How we have many organizations today that are managing reputation and brand. How we will, in the future, be able to manage this kind of assets. So we have natural assets, we have so many kinds of assets, and that will come. How we will manage them, for me, it's in the same way how we take decisions about this.